First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for the organizers of the forum for inviting me to give a speech here and to give me as much as 20 minutes, which is really a rare occasion. And it's actually, I need to apologize because my topic is probably the most incomprehensible topic in the whole of agenda of the forum. And once again, I apologize because my presentation would be as incomprehensible as the topic as well. The reason is because for internet governance, I'm probably still a Weihan. So, but my background makes me eligible to elaborate a little bit on internet governance and for the reasons for this discourse and for something that I call the grand narrative, which means that it's becoming fashionable and it's becoming necessary to discuss global governance of internet. The point is, I have 20 years experience in IT. I've been a chief representative of the biggest Russian IT company in China for 11 years. But from another point of view, my background is anthropology. So I'm an anthropologist in IT, IT person in anthropology. That's why what I'm going to speak today is not a real regulation, and I'm not going to give you any figures, any graphs, any diagrams. But I would like to, we have a discussion about why it's possible, why it's happening like this, that we start speaking about the internet governance, global internet governance. So I will speak today from the point of view of mythology. So most of the people here probably are in science or even worse in IT. So we're trying to be very rational, and we believe that the mythology is something that is related to the past only. But in reality, the more we are trying to be irrational, the more irrational we behave. And the mythology, the myths and new ones are being created and evolving constantly. And it shapes our behaviors, and it shapes our decisions, and it shapes our discourse and discussion on internet governance. And I would like to prove my point today by elaborating on what kind of myth, what kind of mythology we are in now. So especially those living in the big cities in developed countries, most of them now believe in what I call the basic myth. This basic myth tells us that internet is paramount, that internet is indispensable, that internet is almighty. And you would be forgiven to believe in this if you go to Nanjing Donglu and go to subway station and take a train and see all this, I would call a zombie generation. So the people who are watching their screens, even when they are walking, when they are crossing the streets, they are not undetachable from their screens. And, but as soon as you leave big cities, as soon as you leave the center of the cities, you will discover that internet is not that paramount. Internet is not everywhere. And the most important is internet is not indispensable. Because those of my age, I'm 43 years old, still believe that 20 years ago there were no internet. And 25 years ago, the internet didn't have any influence on our lives. And the society still could operate, and the society still could function, and the people could live happy lives, and nothing happened. And we shall not forget that the ability to adapt for human beings and for the whole society is huge. So if there is no internet, nothing will happen, seriously. It would be a little bit probably difficult to live for 1 year or two, but then nothing will happen. So all the techniques, all the social models then can be restored, or the new ones can appear. So the internet is a very convenient tool. It's really in our everyday lives, in the society lives, but it's not indispensable, and it's not irrecoverable. So this is still a kind of myth. But most of the people believe in this, and then those who believe in the basic myth, they can be divided into two further categories: the optimists and the pessimists. So the optimists, they are very, how say, one. So they really feel that the internet is good for society, that the internet is good for people, that this is something good, and, which is more important, they believe that internet, they still believe seriously that internet should be a free territory, that with no borders, with no real responsibilities. So this is a territory for free people who can escape actually the everyday control. They can be anonymous, they can escape the government control or whatever. And just remember Edward Snowden. He is a symbol, he is a flag of those people who believe that the internet should be free. Although he told nothing new, but he made a bomb. So by telling that the security agency is watching us. So for people who believe, because this is myth, so they believe that the internet shall be free, this was a kind of shock. But philosophers would argue that any excessive freedom, just remember Plato, he told that the excessive freedom is nothing else but excessive slavery. So if we believe that we are free from a government control, we're still under control of IT companies. And this is the fact that we need to take into consideration, taking about global internet. We had a discussion already yesterday, because all the discourse of internet governance is discussing how we control the infrastructure of internet. But infrastructure means nothing if we don't speak about the content of internet. It's the same like you say, I control the bottles of wine. But if you don't control the wine, it makes no sense to control the bottles of wine. So the wine itself is being controlled by Facebook, Google, or whatever companies who control the content. And they not only control what we see, what we do, they also shape our behaviors, they also shape what we need to see and what we will see, and our decisions as well. So why I told it, just to make sure that most of the people here would probably agree that the internet is not free, it has never been free, and it will never be free. But we need to admit that many people around the world still believe that internet shall be free. And then there is a second group of people, I would call them a pessimist, and they believe that internet is under control, and this is bad, and the more internet has influence on our lives is worse. And if you see like books, literature, or movie industry, you will never see any positive, any optimistic film that is dealt with internet or computer or AI development. It all will be cyberpunk, it all will be a little bit pessimistic that the machines or big corporations or whoever else will control us, and they are largely pessimistic about this. But there is a special group of people, and most of the distinguished guests here would probably be in this group, who believes that there is a big bad wolf, and this big bad wolf is an American government. This wolf is controlling the internet, is controlling us, and driving us mad, and just influencing our decisions. I would argue this as well, because if we look at what is happening in the internet, we can see that even the American state is suffering most of the development of internet. Just remember WikiLeaks, or what is happening with American elections. It's actually, seriously speaking, all this buzz about Russian hackers is hushobadao. It has nothing. I mean, seriously, in Russia, we feel it's ridiculous when people in America discussing how Russian hackers is meddling American elections, and Chinese will understand me. In Chinese, it's called 钱之炉, 贵州 donkey. Yeah, so in Russia we feel a little bit like 钱之炉. So because everywhere around is thinking we are so powerful that we can meddle in American elections, which is funny, but anyway. If you look what is happening in America, they are suffering from internet. You can remember Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So it's true that the internet was creation of CIA. It's been developed as a project of CIA, but they lost control of their creation. So the internet makes more troubles to America and to American governments than to anybody else. It's just because of the English. Because Chinese, how can you influence Chinese? So you need to speak Chinese to influence Chinese internet. But you can easily influence American internet because everybody can, not everybody, but lots of people can speak English, can understand what's going on there. But not so many people can understand what's happening in Russia because you need to speak Russian. Anyway, I just give it just for illustration that there are people who believe in a free internet and the people who believe in controlled internet. And the myth is one thing and the narrative is another thing. Narrative is more serious because the myth paves the way for narrative, and narrative is a framework. Is a framework in which you have to operate, in which you have to, so that to be accepted. So when I come here, for example, I need to be in a narrative of internet global governance, otherwise I will not be admitted here. So the narrative is something that you have to share, and narratives are quite powerful. So the optimistic myth paves the way for what I call an opening narrative. So, and I think it was in 2014 that United Nations declared that the access to internet should be considered as a basic human right. To my mind, as an anthropologist, this is absolutely ridiculous because it means that without access to internet we can't live. I would not be surprised if the United Nations will declare that the access to toilet should be considered as a basic human right. Because if we have no access to Weishandian, this is really a disaster, so we can't live without it. And if any government blocks the access to Weishandian, to toilets, this is a crime. But if you don't have access to internet, what would happen? So this is, and the United Nations made us believe that it's as basic as a right for freedom or right of equality or whatever. But this is a narrative. So after United Nations declares this, we all have to operate within this environment that the internet access, however ridiculous it sounds, is a basic human right. And most of us know that the political, political actors now use this narrative for influencing other states, so they can criticize, they can promote, or they can use it in political games, the right of access to internet, which is paving the way for political dominance. But anyway, so this is something that we have to operate within. And then I call it defense, but would be, if it's opening narrative, this is a closing narrative. And the closing narrative, it is those from a pessimistic side who believes that the internet should be controlled and it should be governed. And it is within these narratives that our session here is being held. that everybody who comes here must believe in one way or another that the internet should be governed. And it should not be left free and should not be left unattended. But there is even bigger discourse. And I'm not sure how many American guests are here, but the bigger discourse, I mentioned the big bad wolf, and we are discussing here that the internet shall not be governed by the American government or just for one player in international politics. I believe this is just a part of bigger discourse that the power shift, and that the international organizations, institutions shall govern the world. So this is part of bigger discourse, and I'm not going to touch it today, but it's still important to speak that instead of speaking about legitimate national governments, we really enjoy speaking about illegitimate international institutions that nobody voted for, nobody knows who is behind those institutions. For example, today we have seen during the first lecture lots of acronyms, different acronyms, and we have no idea who is behind. What are the people, and nobody voted for them. Nobody knows. They don't expose themselves. But they are supposed to rule us, and they are supposed to rule internet. Because we believe that internet is so paramount, so it gives a way to the world dominance. And then it should be governed by the international institutions. This is a second narrative, I would call. And it's easy to see that between two narratives there is a huge conflict. So if you feel that the internet is basic human right, how can you have a governing body that controls this basic human right? If we believe that internet is completely free, how can we speak about the governing the internet? Because governing, it means, simply speaking, it means you give the right to control yourself to somebody else. This is simple because for the national government, you give the right for the government, for the police or whatever to exercise control over you because this is illegitimate. For the global governments, it's completely illegitimate, but there is still a narrative that should be global governance of internet. So how can we solve this narrative conflict? And my answer to this question is quite simple. The only possible way that somebody would give up his right is fear. You have to be in fear, you have to be afraid of something, and then you give up your right. Because there are criminals, so you give up your right for freedom, and there is a police, and there is a state. Because state provides security. And that's why, because the state provides security, you give up your right for freedom to the state. And then, if it's internet, the only possible way to make people believe that they should be governed is to make them feel insecure. You have to make them feel that internet is so dangerous that it should be governed and controlled. And what we have heard yesterday, and I told you, being 20 years in IT, I have heard it many, many times, that internet is so convenient, but it's so insecure. And that's why we need a WannaCry. And we started today with discussion about the virus and the WannaCry. Because this is positive. As soon as we start speaking about viruses, we start speaking about governance. And then, because of this, there are Russian hackers. Because of this, there are trolls and all these haters on the internet. Because individuals should feel insecure, because in internet everything can happen and somebody will steal your credit card details or whatever. Societies should feel insecure because they will feel they can be influenced and they can be manipulated. And then you are ready to give up your right. And you don't need a free internet anymore. And that's, to my mind, the reason why we speak about global governments and why the global governments can succeed. Because we all are in fear now, and Yesterday I was really inspired by the last lecture on a big panel session. I don't remember the name of the speaker. Yeah. The former vice head of Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences. He told that the governance comes out of chaos. And this is from Chinese philosophy, and 我也很喜欢庄子，我也喜欢他的理论，就是从混沌，先有混沌，然后有管理。So the governance comes out of chaos. So in order to have just to conclude, to make a conclusion, in order to have a successful governance and in order to make people accept this governance, in order to make people accept all the measures we are going to introduce, first we need a chaos in the internet. First we need really乱七八糟. And then out of this chaos, the need for governance will appear, and people will not fight against the governance. They will come to us and ask, please govern us. Please make the rules. Please make international rules, and we will obey. Because otherwise we feel so insecure, we feel buvandin, and so we need this. And the final comment would be, is it good or bad? For those who believe in a basic myth, it's definitely good. So there would be no conflicts between narratives. But for those who don't believe in the basic myth, it doesn't matter. So it's just the interplay of forces, and it really doesn't matter is internet governed or not, because it's not paramount and it's not indispensable. So it's also thank you everybody, and just sorry for making you listen me for 20 minutes for this boring speech, but anyway, thank you.